One of the most popular arguments for the existence of God is what we call a cosmological argument. In fact, the first three of Thomas Aquinas' famous 5 ways or arguments for the existence of God are all different expressions of the cosmological argument. So, what exactly is a cosmological argument and how does it work? A cosmological argument for the existence of God begins with the things we can observe in the world around us. So, things that we can see and touch and experience. And beginning with our observations of those things, we follow a chain of reasoning that leads us to the conclusion that there must be some reality upon which everything that we observe ultimately depends. And this reality must not itself depend on anything else for its own existence. It's what Aquinas calls a first cause or an unmoved mover. Now, if we think about it, this is actually a kind of reasoning that we do all the time. We use the things that we can see to arrive at beliefs and conclusions about things that we can't necessarily see. So, for example, if I see steam rising from a pot on the stove, I might naturally conclude that the stove is on and that it's heating up the water. Even if I can't see the heat source itself, I can infer it from my observation of its effects. Or another example might be our experience of love. Have you ever been in a situation where someone does something for you that's really kind and really selfless, and the thought pops into your head, wow, that person really loves me? Now, in that moment, you can't see or touch or smell love. Love is not a material reality that you can measure empirically, but you know that it's there and you can infer its presence based on the visible physical effects, the signs of love. So the fact that your friend helped you to move house or brought you a meal when you were sick. Okay, so this is something we do all the time. We reason from visible effects to invisible causes. And that's the kind of thinking that we're doing with the cosmological arguments. We begin with the stuff we can see in the world around us, and then we ask, what caused that stuff? Like, why is the world the way that it is, and where does it all come from? So that's what Aquinas does. He begins by looking around at the world and he notices 3 important features. First of all, things change. They move and develop and grow and decay. Secondly, things come into existence through the action of other things. So paintings are painted by artists and children come into existence through their parents. Third, things come into existence and then pass away, which means that they don't have to exist. And in fact, their existence is contingent or dependent on other things. So from these 3 observations, Aquinas develops 3 arguments that all point towards the conclusion that there must be a reality whose existence is not borrowed from anything else and on which everything else ultimately depends. Now, if that all sounds a little bit abstract or confusing, or like we're taking massive leaps, like how do we go from the fact that things change to the existence of God? Okay, don't worry. That's the point of these videos. What we're going to do is we're going to follow Aquinas' reasoning with him step by step in this video and the next. And we're going to see how his reasoning leads us to the idea of a first cause of everything that exists. Now, before we dive into each of the 3 individual arguments that Aquinas makes, it will be helpful for us to kind of zoom out and look at the overall picture. Because remember that Aquinas' first 3 ways are really different expressions or approaches to one broad idea. So it's kind of like we have a marble sculpture. And we can view that marble sculpture from 3 different angles. And each angle that we look at it from will reveal its own kind of nuance. And together, all 3 angles will contribute to the richness of the overall picture. But it will be much easier for us to do that analysis of the 3 angles if first we've done a kind of once around lap of the whole sculpture and had a look at the whole picture. So in our next video, we're going to look at each of the 3 individual cosmological arguments of Aquinas. But in this video, we're going to start with that once around lap. We're going to do a kind of zoomed out picture of the cosmological argument before looking at the 3 individual expressions of that argument. Okay, so the zoomed out summary of the cosmological argument basically goes like this. When we look at creation, so let's say we take a step back and we look at the whole of the material world, we can essentially see that it is this astonishingly dynamic network of things that are constantly coming into being, growing and changing and interacting, and then eventually passing away and giving rise to new things. And the whole system exists in this continual, interconnected, interdependent web of changes and beginnings and endings. So by way of analogy, we might think of it like a garden where we can see flowers, generation after generation, blooming and then scattering their seeds and then dying and then being replaced by new flowers. The whole system is in continual motion. Now, when we look at that complex system or series of changes, we naturally ask the question, why is all of this here at all? Now, let's say that we ask that question. Okay, why is this all here? Why is creation, the material world, here? And someone might respond to us, well, there really is no why about it. It just has always been that way, right? It's just an infinite series of changes that stretches back all the way through time into infinity. So we can take a single flower and say, well, this flower exists because the flower before it dropped its seed in the earth, and then the flower before that dropped its seed, and the one before that, and on into infinity. Okay, and that's the answer. Everything that exists because of all of the things that came before it. Now, at first glance, that might seem like a pretty adequate answer. However, Aquinas would argue that even if we could say that the universe just stretches back through time infinitely, that still does not explain why the whole series exists at all and continues to exist here and now. Because actually, when we ask that question, why does the universe exist? We're actually kind of talking about 2 different whys. We're talking about 2 different series of cause and effect. One concerns causes that stretch back through history. The other concerns causes that are operating simultaneously in the present. Okay, so what do we mean by that? Well, let's take a random analogy. Let's say that we look at Leonardo da Vinci painting the Mona Lisa. Let's say that we pause time at that exact moment when Leonardo da Vinci is putting the final touches on the Mona Lisa. And we ask the question, why does the Mona Lisa exist? Now, the obvious answer to that question is that Leonardo da Vinci is painting the Mona Lisa. Okay, great. And then we ask the next question, okay, why does Leonardo da Vinci exist? Now pause. Remember, we're not talking about a series of cause and effect stretching back through time. So we're not talking about Da Vinci's parents and great-grandparents, etc. We're asking here and now, in this frozen moment in time, why does Leonardo da Vinci exist here and now? So I guess we could say, well, Leonardo da Vinci exists because, among other things, there is oxygen in the air for him to breathe, and that's keeping him alive. Great. Okay, now why is there oxygen right here and right now? Well, because there are trees nearby, and the trees are releasing oxygen into the environment. Awesome. Why are the trees alive? Well, because they are currently receiving energy from the sun. Now, what we can see here is that we have 2 chains of causation going on. One stretches back through time. That's the one where we talk about, Da Vinci's parents and great-grandparents, etc. And that's one chain that leads us to Da Vinci and the Mona Lisa. But we also have a second chain of causes. And this chain doesn't go in a horizontal line stretching back, it goes in a vertical line stretching up. In this single moment in time, we can see a kind of hierarchy of cause and effect. And these causes and effects are simultaneous. They're all happening at the same time rather than sequentially. So Da Vinci is painting while simultaneously breathing oxygen, while the trees are producing oxygen, while the sun is simultaneously sustaining photosynthesis. So we've got these two chains of causation at work. The horizontal line is what we call a temporal series of causes, so a series that exists through time. And then the vertical line is what we call a hierarchical or essentially ordered series of causes, an ascending hierarchy of simultaneous cause and effect. In other words, in a hierarchical series of causes, each thing in the series can only do what it's doing because it's depending here and now on something else. Now, whenever we ask that question, why is this here? Whether we're asking it of one individual thing or of the whole of the universe, why is this whole thing here? Whenever we ask that question, we're pointing in two different directions, right? The horizontal and the vertical line, and both require an answer. Now, this distinction between a temporal and a hierarchical series of causes is crucial because Aquinas' First Way is primarily concerned with that second kind of series, the hierarchical series. Aquinas argues that while a temporal series of causes could at least in principle extend indefinitely into the past, an essentially ordered series cannot simply consist of endlessly deferred explanations. Now, why is that? Why can't a hierarchical series go on and on forever? Well, let's just say that we follow that causal chain from the Mona Lisa all the way up. So we go, the Mona Lisa exists because of Da Vinci, who exists because of oxygen, which exists because of the trees, which exists because of the sun, which exists because of, the laws of the universe. And as we keep asking what explains each part of the chain, we eventually arrive at a bigger question. What explains the whole thing? Why does this entire network of dependent things exist at all? And we cannot answer that question by just pointing to some other element in the created world, because if we did, then we would just be deferring the answer. We would simply be adding another link to that chain of cause and effect. Eventually, we need to arrive at something that doesn't merely receive its existence from another thing. Otherwise, we would never actually explain why anything exists or acts in the first place. So one classic image that many people turn to explain this idea is the image of a chandelier that's hanging from a chain. Now, no matter how long that chain is, at some point it needs to be held up by something. And that something needs to be separate from the chain. It can't just be another link in the chain. The chain can't just consist of one link after another forever and ever and ever. It ultimately requires something that isn't dependent on the chain, that's holding the whole thing up, and that is not itself being held up by something else. Otherwise, it would just become another part of that chain. Another image that we could use is the image of a banquet table. So we can imagine a table that is infinitely long, right? That just stretches from left to right as far as the eye can see. But what we might have trouble imagining is a table with legs that are infinitely long, that just keep going and going and going and never actually rest on anything. At some point, the legs need to be resting on solid ground, no matter how long they are. And then a final image that we can use, which I've heard Trent Horn use before, is the image of a train passing by. So if we look at a train, each carriage is passing only because the next carriage is pulling it, and that carriage is being moved by the next carriage and the next one. But no matter how many carriages there are, whether there's 3 or 3 bajillion, none of those carriages answers the question of why the whole train is moving in the first place. At some point, you have to arrive at an engine, which is the source of the motion, and that isn't just another carriage. So, Aquinas' claim is similar. The world that we experience consists of things whose existence and activity are dependent. If every member of the hierarchy depended entirely on something else, with no ultimate source of that existence or causal power, then nothing would exist or act at all. So the hierarchy must terminate somewhere. Not necessarily in the first event in history, but in a reality that exists through itself, rather than through another thing, and which can therefore sustain everything else. So, this is what Aquinas means by a first cause or an unmoved mover. Not simply the first thing in time, but the ultimate source that all dependent reality relies on. Now, at this stage, it's important to note that Aquinas isn't at this point trying to establish everything that Christians believe about God. He's not trying to show that this first cause is all knowing and all good, or that he is triune, he's a trinity. His immediate aim is simply to show that there must be a reality whose existence is not derived from anything else and on which everything else ultimately depends. Okay, so that's the kind of zoomed out image of the cosmological argument. In the next video, we're going to start looking at the first three ways, those three different individual expressions of this cosmological argument. And we're going to see how each of them develops this central insight from a different angle. I can't wait. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Okay, bye.